Welcome back. AI company Anthropic is suing the Trump administration and War Secretary Pete Hegseth over the Pentagon's decision, which labels the AI company a, quote, supply chain risk. White House spokesperson Liz Huston telling Fox, quote, President Trump will never allow a radical left woke company to jeopardize our national security by dictating how the greatest and most powerful military in the world operates. The president and Secretary of War are ensuring America's courageous warfighters have the appropriate tools they need to be successful and will guarantee that they're never held hostage by the ideological whims of any big tech leaders. Joining me now is the head of AI policy at the Abundance Institute, Neil Chilson. Neil, good to have you. Thanks so much for being here. What is your reaction to this lawsuit from Anthropic after the Pentagon labeled it a supply chain risk?
Well, I do think that this is more than just a contract spat. It really is a fight over who gets to choose how the American warfighter pursues its mission. And that decision kind of blew up. In normal contract negotiations, I think the Department of Defense or the Department of War would just cancel a contract. Here, there's been a big public fight, and it's ended in this lawsuit. And I think there's been missteps on both sides.
Well, I mean, I understand, but I mean, the AI use cases that we're talking about that Anthropic claimed that they would not budge on were automated weapons targeting systems that involves removing humans from the kill. And what Anthropic said was mass domestic surveillance technology. So 2 questions here. Do you believe there's mass domestic surveillance underway? And when I looked at that, first I thought, well, wait a second, mass domestic surveillance, we don't want that. That's scary stuff. But when you drill down on it, you say, well, it's even scarier to think of the prospect of China developing these capabilities as we sit on our hands.
I think that's right. There is an international competition aspect that's going on here. The Department of War has been clear that that's not what the purpose of this technology was. What they wanted were contracts that allowed all lawful uses, and there was a dispute over who was going to get to interpret those terms. But ultimately, if we want sustainable protections against mass surveillance, Congress needs to step in here. This should not be the types of protections that are guaranteed somehow in a private contract of the Defense Department.
Right. I mean, can you really have one brush stroke on all these companies over what these issues are? We talked to the CFO of OpenAI yesterday, and this company's now facing criticism over what people claim is domestic surveillance concerns. The company signed a new agreement with the Pentagon, deploying its advanced AI systems in classified environments. And the CFO, Sarah Fryer, told me yesterday on this program they were able to understand specifics and agree to it. Watch this.
National security decisions must remain with democratic governments. AI companies need to operate within democratic processes, and we think that ultimately an elected government needs to retain the authority over just how powerful these technologies have become and are being used to protect the country. It's going to require collaboration between the labs and the government, and because of that, we felt it was important that we set in place strong guardrails to make responsible collaboration possible. Clear red lines on no autonomous weapons, no domestic surveillance.
So, Neil, your thoughts? It seems like OpenAI has clear goals. The government agreed to it, and they have the contract.
Yeah, I think some of this comes down to personality differences and whether or not you go public with your dispute rather than trying to work it out.
That makes sense.
And as I said, I think, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry. You want to finish your thought?
Yeah. So so I think that the Department of Defense's reaction in many of these situations has been this supply chain risk designation, which is a very serious accusation. And I think the lawsuit that Anthropic has brought has some strong arguments, but ultimately this is about the loss of trust between the Department of War and Anthropic, and that's something that no lawsuit is going to fix.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're deemed a supply chain risk, that means other companies will have to disentangle themselves from Anthropic if they want to continue doing business with the Department of War. But at the same time, we've got China ramping up its technology. I mean, Beijing says it's accelerating its AI tech production in an attempt to beat the United States on the global stage production while increasing its own surveillance. I mean, we know that nobody does surveillance like China, and they've been surveilling America for decades. The Journal is reporting that China breached an FBI surveillance network used to execute court-ordered wiretaps, potentially exposing sensitive law enforcement data. Here's what OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar told me about that yesterday. Watch this.
It's vital that the U.S. stay on the frontier, right? Leadership in AI comes down to compute, comes down to talent, comes down to infrastructure. Today, the U.S. has major structural advantages. We have the leading AI labs, we have the top chip companies, we have the strongest research universities, and we have the deepest capital markets. And when that ecosystem works together alongside the government, innovation accelerates. And the priority has to stay on execution. And that means building the compute backbone. That means deploying AI across the economy. It's making sure that we're driving GDP productivity. When one side has stronger weapons than another, bad things can happen. And so we need to make sure that we in the U.S. have the right access.
Liz Peek, jump in here as this race between the U.S. and China accelerates. Liz.
Yeah, Neil, it seems to me that this is really overblown in the sense that AI is just another tool. And it seems to me that there's some concern here that we will not be in charge of using this tool in a responsible fashion. I mean, that's what Anthropic is essentially accusing the government of. And I really don't understand where that comes from.
Yeah, so, you know, when Colt turns over an M16 to the Army, they have no capability or possibility of, determining what a soldier points it at or when they pull the trigger. AI is a little bit different because there's an ongoing relationship between the company and the Department of War. And so that means that they have to work closely together. That means they have to trust each other. And it's really important that the Department of War, under its civilian leadership, who is accountable to the American people, has the final say, because ultimately they will in the final end be responsible for what happens.
Well, I mean, the employees think they've got the final say. You know, the Journal this morning is reporting that at least 2 high-level employees from OpenAI have resigned. They're, quote, citing values and principles since the company said that it reached that deal with the Pentagon, Neil. So it's clear what's going on here in terms of the woke employee base.
Well, certainly, and it wouldn't be America if people couldn't refuse to work for the government.
That's right.
And that's fine.
By the way, on AI and jobs, have you done any work in terms of AI and its automation replacing jobs? Because you've got the CEO of Anthropic and the head of Microsoft AI talking a lot about white-collar jobs being replaced in an accelerated fashion in the coming 2 years by automation.
So what we know about technological innovation is that as it makes us more productive, jobs change. And I think this, jobs are bundles of lots of different tasks. AI is very useful to replace some of those tasks. But I think ultimately this is going to free us up to do bigger scale, much more ambitious things. And I think that the types of white collar jobs that Dario and others are talking about are going to transform, but I don't think that there will be ultimately. Humans have lots of problems to solve. There's no shortage of that. And so I think we'll find new and useful ways to use these tools in ways that are productive. There will be disruption along the way, and we need to figure out how to smooth that out, though.
Well, I'm glad you said all of that, because all of this drama surrounding jobs going away has been at a fever pitch. Neil, good to see you. Thank you, sir. Neil Chilson this morning on AI. Stay with us. We'll be right back.